on April 30, 2020. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present.
We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us to the common good and as in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Council, is there any further declarations of interest from the other evening?
I have non-significant, non-pecuniary.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. So in accordance with clause 18.3 of our Code of Meeting Practice, tonight's meeting is to resume an adjourned debate in respect to item 4.4 of the 27th of April 2020 Council meeting in considering the Boronia Park Plan of Management. This is not a new motion, and addresses have already been heard on this motion from members of our community who registered to address Council. There will not be a further opportunity to reopen public addresses. After submissions were made on Monday night, the Council report was moved by Councillor Miles and seconded by Councillor Collins. Councillor Williams provided a list of proposed amendment, which we will now put up on the screen before you. When we suspended the debate on this issue on Monday evening, Councillor Williams was working through the amendments which are now on the screen. Can I hand back to you, Councillor Williams, for you to proceed, please?
On mute.
I sent through to you and to the General Manager a modified or updated list of those. A staff member sent me what was provided that was taken down by the minute taker at the meeting. There's a series of changes or enhancements to that which I've forwarded on to the General Manager and yourself, which I'd like to substitute in place of those that are on the table now.
I don't have them in front of me, Councillor Williams, so we'll just check to see if we can locate them.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Williams, what time did you send those through?
Probably about 2:30, 3 o'clock.
Would it be possible for you to resend those through now? Are you in front of your computer?
Yes, I am. Yep, can do that right now. I'll just go across to the other screen. To General Manager. Okay, they've been sent through to you again.
Okay, while we're waiting for that to be loaded up, I'd like to say that we suspended the debate on Monday evening in order for the Council to consider the LSPS before the required close time, and deferred other remaining items to our next ordinary meeting of Council in May. We are now here tonight to resume the debate for the councillors and to consider Councillor Williams' amendments, which will be before us in a moment. I would remind councillors that the debate to keep comments to the facts and respectful, and that there is a time limit of 5 minutes for each speaker. Should have it up in a moment, Councillor.
Just in clarification, Mr. Mayor, the bulk of it's the same. There's just a couple of inclusions, and clarity has been improved around some of the points.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, through you, but perhaps it would be useful for Councillor Williams to read the amendments while we're getting them via email.
Thank you. Good suggestion. We're just the email hasn't arrived again. Councillor Williams, would you mind sending it again, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Williams, I've just sent you an email. If you wouldn't mind attaching it to the one I've just sent you, and that should work. Or as if that doesn't, as Councillor Miles suggests, perhaps we can just talk through the amended wording.
Well, I've gone to a lot of trouble to make sure that you have that easily available. Here it is. And I'll just reply and attachment and okay, I've just sent that through again to that in response to that email. I hope I've picked up the right one, but we'll see in a moment.
We've got it now.
Just came through.
One moment.
Mr. Mayor, by sending that through, I was hoping that would have been circulated prior to the meeting, but obviously that hasn't been possible.
Apologise for that, Councillor Williams. It might after the meeting, we might just clarify with IT where that went, because the one you just sent came through very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I have sent it to the councillors as well, so if you are in front of a computer screen, it should come up as well before you.
Yep, that's the one that I sent through. So, do you want me to read that out, Mr. Mayor, or do you want me just to continue on?
Look, are there any changes to the first few pages listed there? I think you were probably down to about 168, 187. Have there been any changes prior to that?
Yes, well, I've included 163, 164, which are referenced in terms of the fencing issue. So it's probably no different to what I was talking about before, but it just gives that cross-referencing back to where it's mentioned elsewhere in the plan.
Okay, thank you. The floor is yours.
We've talked about the paddock, I think. So do you want me to read these out and then speak to them, or do you want me just to speak?
Speak to each of them as they progress.
Okay. The Finlay paddock is one that I believe is important, that we return an isolated parcel of land to one that can be a useful addition to our bushland, and that would require some recharacterisation of that. And the staff member at the briefing indicated that that was more than feasible to do that. So I think that would be an important attribute to add back into our bushland. E10, again, fencing, and 176, 168 are about fencing. I think fencing would be intrusive and not inclusive in terms of being able to enjoy what is currently an open parkland. Insert the park bush there, management protection. Natural. Yep, and getting down to the delete the points, I just have to refer back to where that is in the document. Dear. Where are we up to? E18, yep, and coming down to the substantive one, which is PDF L32 on page 192. I'd like to sort of talk about that in some detail. In making these changes or amendments to the plan, I've used some guiding principles behind my decision to submit these amendments, and they are: I fully support the need for, and it is indisputable, the need to have additional sporting facilities in Boronia Park. Boronia Park is a local facility, not a regional one, and should represent that scale. I also believe in as a guiding principle, Boronia Park is a diverse array of user groups and all opinions need to be considered. Respect the outcomes of the community consultation process that has been extensive. Be an evidence-based and fit-for-purpose decision-making. What is feasible based on need, funding and context of the park, and be respectful of the unique attributes of the heritage of the park. And I see those as the key guiding principles in making decisions which underlie the amendments which I've put on the table. I've been a strong supporter for many years of improving facilities at Boronia Park. As a resident, I've spoken passionately in favour of facilities when previously planned and considered by the Council in 2015. We need to be mindful that plans are not set in stone and do get reviewed regularly. The perception that there is a polarisation of opinion from the consultation process and the extensive emails I've received, everyone is fierce agreement about improving. There's nobody that says we don't need to improve the facilities. It's a location and scale issue, and I would be very disappointed if people represent me in the community as being somebody that's opposing additional facilities, because that's just not true. Boronia Park is a local facility, not a regional facility, and should represent that scale. I would be horrified to find, and I'm sure the Huntersville community, if we were to lose control of these facilities to a regional process where clubs out of area and sports that aren't currently played in that area would take a fairly role in using those. It should be at a club level, and the basis of my discussion and my points here is all around a club level. And it's a proud club tradition of 122 years. And I believe strongly that 525 square metres that's in the report or in the plan is far excessive. We need to take seriously the findings of the consultation process and as conducted by the independent consultant. So why, after 14 months of consultation, has this process been basically disregarded? Why has the consultant's report, in particular recommendation 1, been changed significantly following the council briefing a few weeks ago? It is unreasonable, I believe, to alter the report without justification and notification to councillors. This change and justify these changes. This raises a critical issue of the conducting of secret briefings without the transparent public. The public remain unaware of the previous position presented by the consultant, and why have they changed their report to dismiss the community concern regarding option 1 in favour of option 3. As a compromise, I'm proposing option 4 as a preferred site. The sporting facility is to be fit for scale and consider materials, context and location. Footplate should not exceed 350 square metres, and that complies with the peak bodies, both rugby and cricket, in terms of club-based facilities of this nature. It also aligns very closely with what the proposal originally put on the table by the Huntersville Rugby Club, which was 300 square metres for the building footprint, plus another 100 square metres for a balcony, which was a lightweight sort of structure. The lower floor, as we've all seen, should be all about change rooms, all those facilities that people need. It should not exceed 6.6 metres in total height, and it should easily fit with minimal disturbance between the disturbance in its locations. Material should be lightweight, such as weatherboard, congregation iron, and whatever. A 525 square metre building would resemble the town hall or the Des Moines facility, park facility.
I'll stop you just for a moment. I realise that you're presenting your amendments. You have spoken for more than 5 minutes. Could I just check that councillors are happy to continue with this for a little bit longer? I think we need to hear it. Everybody in favour? Against? Against Councillor Miles, and anybody else against? Just Councillor Collins. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity. It's an important issue, and I think these points need to be made. The problem with placing it where it's in the plan at the moment is clearly one that it can't fit. It would end up being a long linear building that would fit, would serve no real purpose functionally, and it would provide a very solid block when viewed across the parkland area. It is one that I think it's an important issue to make sure that the heritage of the site is respected, and it is a heritage site. We have the grandstand and the curtilage of the oval that is quite crucial in terms of maintaining the long-term context of which that heritage status. It also is important to make sure the scale doesn't intrude on the playing space on Oval 2 and certainly doesn't intrude onto the Oval 1. So a more functional building that would provide the necessary requirements to meet the clubs and the sporting community and the schools that want to use the storage, and everybody else is appropriate. We've got the problem also that I feel from reading the probably hundreds of emails that we've got, that there is the perception that we're talking about Site 2. That is not the case. A lot of the presentations to council was about between the car park, the netball courts, and the and Oval 1 and 2. Now, that is not the site that council is proposing in the plan. The site is a very narrow point between the two ovals. Site 4, which is down towards the netball courts, would provide the same amenity, provide the same proximity and more proximity to Oval 3. And I think that is a much more appropriate location. And the footprint of the building could be such that it is a block form rather than a long ribbon. If it's at a lower scale, it provides that important aspect of not presenting a block in the sight lines across the precinct. So it is crucial that we take into account those aspects that make the park important, particularly in terms of the location of this building and the scale of the building. And I think it's equally incumbent on council to make sure that in doing that, it articulates enough detail to allow the approval process to reflect on what the community values are at this location and what has been done through the community consultation. it will be approved by the local planning panel. If we just leave the thing open without giving any guidance, then we will end up with something that we'll all regret into the future. And it will be, and if we do go ahead with the current location and you go through the planning process, I'm confident that we will find out that it won't fit in that location, and then we'll have to go back through another planning process, another consultation process to end up with an outcome, and that would take another 18 months. So I think we have to be very serious about what this building will look like, how it will fit in, and more importantly, whether the location can take what is being proposed. And I believe it can't. And I fear that if we get down the next level of planning, that will be demonstrated, and we'll have to go back through another process of developing a plan that has a location that reflects the need. Now, I would be suggesting that we have a bet each way, and if it doesn't turn out that location 4 near the tennis courts, the cricket nets, then we need to move to option 1, which is the one that was favoured by the community. Nobody's going to be happy, I guess, in the outcome, but council has done a thorough process and consultation, needs to respect that process and make sure that both the sporting community, the users of the park and the residents who live around it have the opportunity to come together and enjoy what has been enjoyed now for 150 years. So, Mr. Mayor, I believe these amendments are appropriate and should be incorporated within the plan, and our community, I think, and the area will be much better for it.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Is anybody wishing to speak against the amendments? Can we bring the amendments back on screen just quickly again, please? Anybody wishing to speak against those amendments? Councillor Miles.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will. On a number of fronts, the location that is reflected in the draft plan as it is in the business paper is a result of the consultation and of a effort by council to come up with an outcome for the immediate residents of Park Road, but also something that the clubs can work with. So I was an advocate for pushing the option that was placed nearest the car park as far into the park as possible, so that the residents of Park Road could have buffers and obviously the amenities building pushed away from the actual road side. So the plan is reflective of the process that's been undertaken. It's also reflective of the views of a lot of the residents of Park Road and of the clubs. Now, what I don't quite understand about the amendments that are being put up is that we've been through a process. The professionals that we have, the independent professionals that we got to draw up this draft plan, have come to a conclusion. The clubs are all confident that the facility can be built where it is. Council is also confident that council staff are confident that it can be built where it is. The only person who doesn't seem to think that it can't be built where we are prescribing it to be built in this document is Councillor Williams, because, you know, there's nothing in this report that suggests to me that it can't be done. Now, the siting issue is one thing. The size issue is another. With any project, you always give yourself enough breathing space to come up with a design that is compatible for the scenario. So it doesn't mean that we're going to end up with a footprint as large as what's in here. It means that we have area to work in that allows us to come up with the best design solution for what needs to go up on in that space. What Councillor Williams is also forgetting is that council is the one that submits the DA. The DA is our DA. It's not being submitted by the club. It's not being submitted by some phantasm. It's being submitted by council. The design stage, which will proceed, which will precede this plan of management being approved, if it is approved in its current form, will be conducted by Hunter's Hill Council. So when he says that we don't know what could be built there, it is council that makes that decision. So we know exactly what can be built there. The idea that it's somehow out of our hands is dishonest. The idea that we don't control the size of the plot, the size of the building, exactly what goes in there is dishonest because
Mr. Mayor, point of order.
Councillor Miles, point of order.
No, point of order in relation to clause 15.11, part D.
I think it's a defamatory statement. So
I do too.
Councillor Miles.
It is not true then that we do not submit the DA. We are in control of what is placed on that site. So to constrain ourselves in the design and the delivery of a building that is the best, that has the best outcome for not only the club but the community is ridiculous. We need to give ourselves the capacity, that the ability to design this thing to fit in the spot where we have delegated that it should be placed. Now, the sizing of the building is, in my view, eminently sensible. It's away from the road, which is what the residents of Park Road wanted. It is close enough to all of the different sporting facilities and the, let's say, main users of what the building would be. The netball club is happy with its location. The rugby club is happy with its location. The Pirates cricket is happy with its location. It's central. It's practical. I don't know why we're still having this discussion, because I don't know, in the flurry of emails that's been coming to us in the last couple of days and in the last week, I don't know anyone that's come to me from any of the clubs that have said that they don't think that it's a good option. Equally, it is in the view of many of the residents around there a much better option than having a building close up adjoining the road, adjoining the car park. So this is a good option. I think that we need to proceed in the recommendations in the business paper.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Anybody wishing to speak in favour of the amendment? Anybody wishing to speak against the amendment? I'm sorry, I missed you, Councillor. Councillor Sanderson.
We have a question, if I could, I'll ask through you to the General Manager, who I presume will pass it on to appropriate member of staff. But has anyone had a look to see what sort of area of building and what sort of shape it would take in the locations proposed in the draft plan of management?
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We've, as stated last at part one of this meeting, until we have a firm site, it's difficult to get into detailed design. Having said that, we have looked at the 4 locations that were proposed to see if it's feasible and practical, because there's no point putting up options that aren't practical or feasible. And the site between 1 and 2 is feasible, practical, but subject to detailed design, which would refine the scale, the form, and respond to the unique character of that precinct.
Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Well, I guess I guess you can't give it an area, but I'm just very concerned about how much you can fit in there.
Councillor, it's not a debate.
No.
But you do have the answer to your question?
I guess I do. Always, as far as it can be answered.
Thank you. Do you wish to make further comment?
No.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
And
I can't hear you, Mr. Mayor, so I've lost your audio.
Check. Can anybody else hear my?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Right, thank you.
It was just
So-
muted for a moment. My question,
You've got a question?
I do, yes.
Who's your question?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager. Sorry?
Yes, go ahead.
Just that, following up from Councillor Sanderson's comment there, does that mean that the building can be built within a 10-metre depth without taking in any of Boronia Park Oval number 1 and being in conflict with another provision, another action within the plan of management that identifies the trees in that location as being significant and should be retained and nurtured? So is it possible to build a building that would meet the needs of the sporting groups and the community facility in a space that's only 10 metres wide? Or are you proposing to use some of Oval 1 and intrude within the heritage precinct? And also, if it's only 10 metres wide, it would have to be 50 metres long, and that would be a monolithic.
Councillor, must put your question succinctly and respectfully. So I think you.
Well, it was respectfully,
but the question is, does it fit in the space? Is that correct?
No. Well, my big question is, will it be in conflict with the curtilage of the grandstand being the Oval number 1, and will it not impede on the sideline of the sporting field on Oval 2? And is she confident that the building can be built with a 10-metre depth to it, and therefore it will be a 50-metre long building, and therefore it will have a linear monolithic presentation? Is she happy with that?
The question is, can it be built, or is the General Manager happy?
No, the question...
Can it be built in that space?
Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, the question, can it be built in that space with particular reference to whether it will need to intrude into Oval 1, which I assume it will, and whether it will result in the loss of trees that are identified in the plan as important, and will it intrude upon or provide conflict with the sideline for Oval 2?
Okay, thank you. General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as with any site, there are always constraints, and that's what design will bring out, and then there's always a design solution to that, Councillor Williams. We're not at that point.
Okay. Anybody wishing to speak against the amendment? For the amendment? Okay. I'll put the amendment now. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against? We have 2 in favour, Councillor Williams and Councillor Sanderson. Everyone else against. Thank you, Councillor.
The amendment's lost.
Amendment's lost. So, are there any further amendments that we need to deal with? Councillor Sanderson. We've just lost the audio for a moment. Start again, please.
Just a minute. Yeah, I seem to be unmuted. Is that coming through okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Look, I have a couple of very simple amendments. I think the first of them, if we go down to the bottom of that page, if we could, that just at point 6, I'd ask that we amend point 6 to thank those who made submissions to this process. It's been going on for some time, and it's important that people are, that we appear grateful for the submissions that have been made. I hope that the mover and seconder of the motion would accept that amendment without it being necessary for me to put it formally.
So that's Councillor Miles and Councillor Collins.
So we're dealing with an amendment at the moment, aren't we? So are you asking them to take that in?
Well, what I propose to do is to do it in 3 stages. The first one I think is so small. It's just a matter of, showing courtesy of thanking people who have made submissions. And I would hope that Councillor Miles and Councillor Collins would accept that amendment.
I'm happy to accept that amendment that those respondents are thanked.
Good. Thank you very much, Councillor Miles.
Councillor Collins?
Yes, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Good.
Councillor Sanderson?
All right, if I can go on to my second amendment, so if you go up to the top of that page, what I'd suggest that the amendment that we amend the action LL3, which deals with leases and licences and so on. I had a little bit of trouble with the drafting with that because it quite often the document refers to or license or other form of estate. Now, as soon as it does that, that opens it back up to the possibility of leases. And I think we've had a lot of discussions where we understand leases are not appropriate. So if you have a look at the wording of that, I've put this to the General Manager. She's come back. Councillor McLaughlin has given me some advice on this as well. I think it's just a tidying up to make sure that that we have licenses rather than leases, and also in terms of any licensing of alcohol, or it will be limited to the sort of license you would expect in a facility like that, that being a limited license for single or multifunction, and that's provided. Whereas, unfortunately, as it was drafted, what was happening is that whether we're talking about, I think the term that they used was, if I can find it, or such as, I think they said. Now, I just don't think that's appropriate, and I think this is a significant tidying up. It also gives people confidence that that will be the licence status of the building. So again, that's pretty straightforward. I'd ask if Councillor Miles and Councillor Collins would accept that amendment.
I will not.
Okay, well, in that case, I'll put the amendment.
The first part of it?
Well, I'll just put
A.
I'll put A at this point in time, because I think there are a couple of different things, and I think it'd be better for them to be tested separately.
All right, so do we have a seconder for that amendment, which is 1B, is that correct?
1A at this stage.
1A?
Yep.
You want to move 1A?
Yes.
There's a seconder for 1A. Councillor McLaughlin, by the look of it. Okay. Councillor Sanderson, do you wish to speak further on that?
No, look, I think it's pretty straightforward. One of the things that this amendment will do is give people confidence about the...
Could I just ask you to hold for a minute? I've got a bit of a problem. I can't see Councillor McLaughlin on my screen.
Up at the top, under you,
Can't see it.
and on the big screen.
I can see it there.
Okay.
I can't see it on my personal screen. So if I'm looking at this screen, I can't see you. Sorry to hold you up. Councillor McLaughlin, did you have a question? No, can't hear Councillor McLaughlin now. Hold on just a minute. Okay, thank you. We're good again. Councillor Sanderson, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think
Councillor
everyone's...
McLaughlin, you got your hand up again?
A point of clarification, if I could. Through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Sanderson, are we looking at the same amendment document?
This
Because the one that's on the screen is not the one I've got in front of me. That is the most latest draft, I think.
I sent this one through, and I copied all councillors. You might be looking at one that was, I think I sent to you when we were discussing the amendment. You may have the other one.
No, that's fine. Well, in that case, then I think we're talking about point we're talking about point B in your amendments at the moment.
No, I changed the order.
Okay.
So what I've done is put, because I thought the lease was a more straightforward, or leases license business was more.
We're dealing with 1A, just to be clear.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think we'll talk in terms of the amendment to action LL3. And what we're talking about there is just making a statement at the top of LL3 that the facility is for the use of or the facility is for non-exclusive use by sporting clubs and community groups. We're removing the doubtful terminology that's such as limited licensing, because it's just giving it as an example rather than what it should actually be, and then making it clarifying it by saying no licenses relating to gaming or liquor other than limited license, single or multifunction liquor license will be permitted. And I think that's important, so that we know precisely what is permitted there. It gives people in the neighbourhood confidence about what can occur there. It also prevents what we've had in the past, where we've had people running around talking about the pub in the park. You know, which was
Councillor, are you now moving this are you moving this now?
I thought I had moved it.
You are moving this?
I thought we're in debate.
Well, you're speaking to it.
Yes, exactly.
All right. And is there a seconder for that?
Yeah, I think Councillor McLaughlin did second it.
Okay, still a seconder. All right.
Mr. Mayor, can I just make a quick point of order?
You can.
Just noticing in the minutes that Councillor Miles and Councillor Collins are okay to incorporate 1A of Councillor Sanderson's proposed amendment. That's not correct if the amendment is 1A, which is what's seen on the screen, which is the footprint issue.
No.
So Councillor Sanderson is speaking to 1B at the moment.
Yeah, I apologise. So it doesn't matter which order they go in. Yeah. It's just I reversed the order when I put it in, because my intention was to...
You're speaking to 1B. Let's be quite clear. You're speaking to 1B at the moment.
Okay, as it appears on the screen, yes.
Right. And you have a seconder.
Yes, look, I think that's all I need to say about it, really.
All right. Anybody wishing to speak against that? Councillor Miles.
I will, Mr. Mayor. I think that the gaming issue is no one's talking about gaming being a realistic prospect at the park. I don't even know why we're still talking about it, to be honest. The substantive issue of licences is covered in the document. I'm happy with how it has been covered. Under this motion, given that Councillor Sanderson is saying that there will only be liquor licences, function liquor licences, it would preclude, in my understanding, the current club licence that the club currently holds and uses in the grandstand. So I'm not going to limit the club's capacity to do what they're doing now in this new facility, or have to apply for a spot licence every time they have a home game. So I can't support this amendment, because it is going to restrict the capacity of the clubs to do what they're doing now. Equally, what Councillor Sanderson is talking about is covered in the document as it is, and also the prospect of gaming in this location is absurd. No one's talking about gaming going into this site. I don't think anyone will ever talk about gaming going into this site. In fact, I can't even fathom the economics of trying to put gaming onto a community facility in the middle of a field. So I think it's unnecessary in some parts and restrictive in others.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak for the amendment? Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, I'll speak for the amendment, but only very briefly, because it is a very simple amendment and it's just tidying up a couple of simple drafting issues. And it's simply providing standard precautions that we would put in place for any use of any community facilities that we were building in the municipality. Just in response to Councillor Miles's saying that he doesn't think the current licence that the club currently has would be covered by this, I think I can pretty safely assume that the club at the moment has a limited licence multifunction liquor license in place, which enables them to hold any number of events through, it's probably capped, but any number of events throughout the year at that location in Boronia Park. Likewise, that same limited license allows people who come in, say the netball, say the Ravens come in and want to have a function, they might have a single limited license. So those two licenses, the multifunction and single, are the ones that are most widely used by clubs in these situations. Things like on-premises and hotel licenses are not applicable to these kinds of clubs. So I'm pretty sure that the club would be covered by this, and if it isn't, I'd be very surprised.
They have what's called a club's licence.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Is anybody wishing to speak against the amendment? Councillor Collins.
Can we just get clarification on that then? I don't want to assume anything, because we're changing a plan that's been prepared by professionals, and to assume something I don't think would be very effective at this point in time. So do we know that?
General Manager, are you able to clarify the differences?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I might ask our Parks Planner to respond to that.
As far as I was aware, the club has a multi-function limited liquor licence. That was the documentation I could find in council's records. That gets renewed every year, but that was the documents that I found.
Does that clarify it, Councillor Collins?
It doesn't. What I want is a definitive statement, because if it's what we're doing here seems to be just fiddling with the edges. But I want to be sure that not just we think we're sure, we're confident. I would like to know. So otherwise, we shouldn't be changing it, because we can always that can always be discussed at a. I don't know why this has been such a big deal in the plan of management, because there are other ways to deal with this issue.
Okay, so I'll just go back with your question again, Councillor Collins, to the General Manager. Do you feel that clarifies it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I might just ask the Parks Planner just to clarify, but my understanding is with a liquor licence, landlords need to provide, or the property owner needs to provide consent. So that may well address any council concerns.
I wasn't able to find the most up-to-date consent. I found documents for a few years previous, but not a current one in the records.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Miles. Councillor Miles, do you have some information? Because that might be relevant.
Not in front of me, no. But my understanding of clubs licences is that, as you said, it's not the same as is a hotelier's licence, but they are licences that are as the General Manager said, or the Park Manager said, if the Ravens want to use the licence, then they'll have to apply for a spot licence. But the rugby club's licence would be a permanent, semi-permanent, or permanent licence, I would have thought. Anyway, I couldn't tell you for sure. We'd have to clarify with the clubs, but it would seem to me that the issue that the General Manager just raised, that they'll have to apply through us anyways to resolve this issue.
Okay, so we've had the questions. So, Councillor Collins, do you have another question, or do you wish?
I just want to speak briefly to it. There is an opportunity to as the General Manager said, through the landlord's licence. If no one can say 100% categorically that they know this situation here, why are we fiddling with the minutia when we're confident of it but not absolutely certain of it? Can't we just leave it as the professionals have prepared it, and then if there is an issue down the track, we can I just think it's dangerous to make a decision here if in actual fact it means that what they're already doing can't be done and we cause unnecessary. I agree with the objective of what it's trying to do. I definitely do. There will be a time to do that. It's just not right now, because if we actually just stuff this little part up, I don't know what, if we adopt the plan of management and it turns out that we have taken away something they already do, well, that's going to be pretty disastrous. So for the sake of a few words, I would just recommend leaving it as it is, unless we can 100% with certainty. And I'm not confident because I haven't seen anything about this. And I don't know much about licensing.
All right, thank you, Councillor Collins. I'll come back to you in just a moment, Councillor Sanderson. General Manager?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just checking the Liquor and Gaming New South Wales site, one of the criteria is that a copy of development consent or approval allowing licence at your venue from your local council. So if the recommendation or the amendment isn't carried, there is that safeguard where the council does need to provide concurrence as part of their approval process or application to Liquor and Gaming. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Council, is anybody wishing to speak for the amendment? Against the amendment? Councillor Sanderson, did you have a question? One moment, we've lost your audio.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Look, I did look into this. One of the issues is with the club licence and that class of licence, that effectively you have to be the exclusive occupier. It wouldn't be possible to have multiple licences where you have a number of different occupiers. So clearly in a shared or in a premises where you have the rugby club there in the winter and the cricketers in the summer and other people having functions at other times, these limited licences are going to be the only ones that will work. So I'm quite confident about the appropriateness of this measure.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miles.
Can I just ask a question of Councillor Sanderson?
You can. Councillor Sanderson.
Councillor Sanderson, sorry. Does that mean that you believe that the current club's licences that's held by the rugby club, you believe won't, if this motion passes, won't be able to be used in the new premises, and that they'd have to apply it for a spot licence every time they had a function?
No, the licence that they have at the present time will be absolutely appropriate, but they can have a multiple licence, and basically they can do that on an annual basis.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Not really.
Councillor Collins.
Councillor Collins, do you have a question?
Just of the General Manager and through you, Mr. Mayor. And I have to admit, I really don't know much about licences. And so when we talk about different classes of licences, I'm very reluctant to change this because I don't know enough. So from the if I can ask of the General Manager, based on what the document that we have here, do we still have the ability to have input into how down the track I appreciate what's trying to be done and I actually agree with it, but I just, the way that we're doing it, I think, so if you understand my question, can we do it in another way down the track without doing this now? And your music.
General Manager.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. As mentioned, on the liquor and gaming side, it does talk about the process for clubs or organisations to apply for an appropriate liquor licence. Part of that is a copy, as I said, of a development consent or approval allowing the licence at that particular venue. So council still has the control or the influence as to whether or not it wishes to provide that. If they think that the licence is inappropriate, based on what the parks planner has said, that the practice has been for the the rugby club to have a multifunction licence. So what is proposed by Councillor Sanderson is in line with what the previous practice has been. But I guess there's also the added safeguard through the liquor and gaming process for council to also give concurrence or not to any application that's submitted.
Okay, Councillor Collins, do you feel that answers your question?
Look, it's a lot to process, but I think what you're saying is that we're not 100% sure what they're using now. In the future, we will be able to limit it by not allowing the DA. Is it, or no? Sorry, you're saying we do know for sure what they've got?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we believe that it is a multifunction licence that is currently in place. But as I said, through liquor and gaming, council also needs to provide its approval as part of that process. But we believe, based on what records we have, they do have a multifunction licence.
Okay. Anybody wishing to speak for the amendment? Councillor Williams. One moment, we just get your sound on. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we've just heard from the General Manager and from Councillor Sanderson, this decision will not change the current status quo, but it's important for Council to make it clear to any potential or prospective users of that facility that we won't entertain gaming on the site. We won't have a larger liquor licence environment. We know that that's multi-licence is being used by the current sporting body, and there's no reason why that would change. But I think Council should be making it clear that it's a community facility, it's a sporting facility, it's not a function facility, and therefore things like gaming are inappropriate, and a larger, more expansive liquor licence is also inappropriate. So I think it's important and will save future users of that facility when and if built to not put in applications that won't be considered as being relevant. So I support the amendment, and I think it's important that we make it clear to any prospective users of the site what the rules are, and let the community be aware that Council's going to be strong on those issues, because there a few 10, 20 years ago there was ambitions for these sort of things, and I know it's not on the agenda now, but we're talking about a facility that will last for quite a long time into the future, and I think we need to be clear and upfront as to what the community expectations are and what the rules of engagement are around the use of those facilities.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against? For? Could you bring the amendment back up on the screen, please? So to be quite clear, we're dealing with item 1B at the moment. Are there any further questions? If there's not, I'll put the amendment. Those in, could I bring the people back on the faces on the screen again, please? Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Could I be muted, please, because there's a...
Could you unmute Councillor Williams again, please? Sorry, you were muted a bit too early. We didn't hear what you said.
Oh, just that there's a family dinner going on behind me, and I don't think you or the general public would be too interested in the discussion around the family table.
No,
so just mute me when I'm not.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. All right, so Councillor Sanderson, just one moment. We'll unmute you. Is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah, my apologies. I wonder whether the what was on the screen then was actually what I had proposed.
All right,
Back on again?
let's bring it up again, please.
Yeah.
Is that the query that?
Yeah, this is what's happened.
Councillor Sanderson, are you?
Yeah, look, that's quite an old amendment. I don't know where that's come from, actually. I mean, that's why I got confused.
That's what we've been debating.
Oh, well, I mean, the same effect. Where is it? Yeah, no, okay. Well, that's all. It seems you mixed up. Yeah, well, that's correct. What we've got on the screen now, to be clear. The A that we have on the screen at the present time. So that's the document I sent this afternoon, and the other bit is not. Oh, I don't know where that's come from.
All right, let's be quite clear about what we're about to vote on. Is it different to what we've just debated, Councillor?
Look, the gist of it is precisely the same. It's just the wording is different. If you just go down to as I was saying was A, and that is what was the latest thing I sent through this afternoon.
That was the confusion between A and B a bit earlier.
That's precisely it. So what's happened is,
I think saying one thing and I was thinking something else. I understand.
Well, I think someone had loaded up my earlier document. Then when the later one came through, they've only changed half of it over. But what's on the screen at the present time, and that's why I was saying A, is what I propose.
Okay. So we've concluded our debate and we're about to vote on it. So we could just get that on the screen. We're talking about A.
Yep. No, not that one up there. That one there.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sanderson, what was on the screen originally was what was sent through at 5:30 this afternoon.
Oh, it wasn't that late. No, I said it through earlier than that.
Councillor Sanderson, really that's what we've just debated.
No, the document I had in front of me, it was sent to everyone this afternoon, was what was lower on the screen. That's why I was talking about A. It's basically the same.
Councillor Sanderson, if I could just say to you, what we've just debated is not what you think we should be voting on. What we've just debated is what's at the top of the screen. Are there any changes which we could make to the one at the top of the screen? Are there any major difference between what we've just debated and what we're now looking at?
Yes, there's significant wording differences, but I mean, if people read that, I think that's the gist of what we've debated.
Councillors, could you read through that and see if there are any concerns? Do any councillors have any concerns about voting on what we're looking at the screen at the moment, 1A? All right, we have the faces back up again and we'll vote. Thank you all for your patience at the moment. This is not the easiest thing to organise from our end. We have a couple of people running this as well. So I'll put the amendment. Those in favour? Against? That's passed. And Mark Bennett, Zach Miles and Ben Collins, councillors, voted against it. So that's carried. So let's go back to the other part of your motion, Councillor Sanderson. Just turn the sound on, please, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Sanderson.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Not your motion, your amendment, excuse me.
My amendment is that also that point 1 of the motion have the amendment that it will be B.
Are we looking at the right one?
Well, I am, and
One that's on your screen, is that the correct one?
yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good. That the maximum building footprint for the sport slash community facility be reduced from 525 square metres to 450 square metres, including deleting the sample dimensions given in action PDFL 32.
And do you have a second to that, please? Councillor McLaughlin, thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Sanderson, would you like to speak to that?
Look, I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I think Councillor Williams has produced some documents, and just inspection of the site suggests that it's going to be very tight to get a building of that size in. I've done quite a bit of work on this. I based the size of 450 square metres on a standard that's produced by Cricket Australia, which is their guidance note 3, club rooms and change facilities. And in that 450 square metres, I was actually able to fit 4 change rooms. So a facility of that size would have room for 2 female and 2 male change rooms, so that you could have home and visitor change rooms for male and female sport that was being conducted at the same time. I have a calculation sheet that I did, and the figure I actually came up with was 435 square metres. As I said, that was 4 change rooms, accessible toilets to the highest standard, a referee's room, medical first aid, a kiosk storeroom, an internal building store of 30 square metres, which we might go over, but I don't think we need to worry about that too much because we do have provisions elsewhere. We're going to have storage in the under the old existing grandstand and potentially other positions around the site. There was also a cleaner store, plant room, entrance foyer of a significant size. Depending on the design, that probably won't be necessary in any case. Stairs, a lift, and I've allowed 35 square metres for walls because the other areas are based on internal dimensions of the rooms. That gave me 435. I called it 450. So you know 450 is going to cover any facility we're likely to put there well and truly. And I haven't seen any justification of the larger 525 figure. So I mean, even that is probably still going to be too big. And but I think it's nice to have that bit of a limit on it, so that we're not making our problems any worse. And the other thing is we've got to be very careful in the design of that building and how it's going to fit into the park in that location, as Councillor Williams has already pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is anybody wishing to speak against that amendment? Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will, just from a purely project management perspective, any prospective building of this type, you give yourself the capacity to design, especially given where it is, design it in a way that may take some jiggling. And this will have to be a very sympathetic building, given its placement. It'll have to be architecturally something that marries in with the Heritage Park and the Heritage Grandstand. What we're doing, if we pass this amendment, is restricting our capacity to design a building in a way that suits the area. Because, as I said, in project management, you give yourself the space. I'm not saying that the building is going to be 450 square metres. I would be surprised if it is. But we do need to cover off the basics that the clubs need and the Boronia Park Public School needs. That will be storage. That will be at least 4 change rooms. That will be probably referees' change rooms. That will be the community facility, the community space. That may be a kiosk. That may be a podium for viewing games. It's going to have a lot of storage, and storage for all the clubs and the netball, cricket and rugby and Boronia Park Public School. So what we're doing, if we are setting dimensions now with no information, is restricting our capacity to come up with the best design outcome. In project management, you give yourself the room to come up with the best design. We haven't reached that stage yet. We are the ones that are going to be putting this DA in. We control what goes on that site. Hunters Hill Council is the one that will submit the application. What we're doing if we pass this amendment is restricting our capacity as council to come up with the best design option for the site. So we're not endorsing a floor plate of a building. The building is not going to be automatically 500 square metres. It won't. We're giving ourselves the capacity to design things in a way that is logical, which is a very standard principle of project management. So, give ourselves the wiggle room to be able to design this thing well. I would be very surprised if it ends up anywhere near that size, but we need to make sure that the clubs, the school, and the broader community get the facilities out of this project that are sorely needed. And I don't know why we're nickel and diming over this stuff at this early stage when we haven't even come to a concrete decision on exactly what goes into exactly what's needed for those groups and users at the park. So it's a bit early to be doing this. And I think we should just, as council, give ourselves the room to come up with the best design option, not restrict our potential floor plate because we're throwing numbers in there. There's no thought process behind this at this point, and it doesn't tie us into 500 square metres. It's just the capacity of what is going to go into that location.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Is anybody wishing to speak in favour of the amendment? Councillor Williams. Just one moment. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I indicated before, when I had my amendments on the table, which council didn't agree to, that contrary to Councillor Miles's assertions that we need to keep the book open and we don't know what the potential for the site is, and we need to run the gauntlet that maybe we'll have the town hall sitting down there or a facility as big as Drummoyne. I don't think there's any reason to have that scale in a plan of management, considering there are a lot of detailed guidelines provided by the peak sporting bodies that indicate what the size of this thing will be or can be if it is at the appropriate scale. And I said at the previous discussion, the scale should be at a club level, not at a regional level. And if it's at if whatever decisions are made, it should be based on the guidelines that are available and clearly available. I've researched them myself. And even if you take the rugby guidelines and at a club level, you would get more than adequate accommodation if you add up all the bits and pieces which we've been talking about and Councillor Sanderson mentioned in terms of rooms and changing toilets and whatever. Then you're looking at a facility based on the rugby guidelines of being 395 square metres, which I might add corresponds with what the rugby club put in their original submission to council, and I guess was part of their submission for the funding. So why are we having this debate about some monumental building when all the evidence, and it is evidence, and I talked about evidence-based decision, is available to allow us to narrow this thing down to what is reasonable, feasible, and affordable. And I, as I've said before, feel that council needs to set the scale of this development. And if we use the guidelines that are available through the sporting bodies, then we will get it right. And I agree 100% that we need to make sure that it respects the heritage and the curtilage of the important attributes of the site. And that includes the natural features and the beauty and the vistas that are available. And I don't think having a building the scale of 525 square metres does any justice to what we're trying to achieve here. And I think we need to have some guiding principles. And one of those should be the scale of the building. And in my view, it should be 350. But I'm quite happy to support 450 if it gets some reality into the debate.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against? Councillor Collins, one moment. Councillor Collins.
I'll be very brief. I don't think there's any intention for anyone to build it at the full scale that's been put in here. But we're not at the design stage of this now, and I think, as Councillor Miles has said, this is just setting. There is going to be a design stage where they have an opportunity to decide on scale and size and what's included. But I haven't seen any designs, and I don't know, there aren't any. So this gives the designer the best opportunity to make up their mind without limiting things. Now, Councillor Sanderson made some designs or sketched up some designs. I don't know if everything's been included, and if it's 400, ends up being 450, or there's something for 455, does something gets pushed around or put out? I just think that we do have an opportunity to look at the design. So I think we should be mindful that the best design outcome is when you don't limit the designer before obviously giving the opportunity for an architect design. It's not going to be 500 square metres. There's not even the money to do that. It's just about putting an envelope there and then allowing the designer to do their job. But having been through such a rigorous process, these professionals have done it, all the consultation. I just think it was, when we had a meeting with them, this issue was raised with the consultant, and they explained that this is just this is a limit, but it's not necessarily what's going to be. So I'm just inclined to stick with what it is and not cause any something that just might cause an issue later. Because I've got no professional evidence to say that 450 is the right number. Okay, it's been put here at 550, other than desire to make small. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak for the amendment? Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, can I be muted, please?
Certainly. Sorry, we missed that. Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin, please go ahead.
Thank you. Look, I guess at the outset, I just want to say that I do support the overall plan of management, and I absolutely support the recommended site for the new facilities building as set out in the report. But I'm going to speak in support of Councillor Sanderson's amendment to reduce the footprint of the building to 450, because to me it strikes a bit of an equitable balance between the minimum that the clubs are needing and what I think is probably a very overly generous 525 in the report. And while I understand completely that that is the maximum allowed, 525 does actually correspond, as far as I'm aware, with the footprint of the Des Moines Oval building. So if that's in fact what 525 is, then that is excessive, and anything around that is excessive in that location in Boronia Park, as far as I'm concerned. The suggested 450 that Councillor Sanderson has come off is a very generous envelope as it is. It doesn't, in my view, having looked at guidelines for rugby buildings and guidelines for cricket buildings, it doesn't, in my opinion, it won't limit the project in any way. So I'm happy with 450 as a middle ground. I'm also conscious of the fact that the Heritage Grandstand will be renovated as part of this, and there will be improved change facilities and toilets in that grandstand as well. So with the change rooms there and the facilities in the park, we'll have plenty of room to meet everyone's needs. I think the siting with a smaller footprint will balance out some of the competing needs of the park users. I think making it 450 and siting it deep enough into the park will assist some of those local residents who are having concerns about the noise and the views and the aesthetics of it. So I do support the plan of management and the siting in principle, but I do think that this change will provide some comfort for those residents who are concerned that this building is going to be oversized. And I'm confident that we will be able to get what we want at both the new facility, but also with the upgrade that we will have in the Heritage Grandstand. I think there's a win-win for everybody.
Thank you, Councillor. Is anybody wishing to speak for the amendment? Against the amendment? I'd like to speak against the amendment. If everyone else is done, everybody done? I'd like to speak, I'd like to speak against the amendment. So, in design, we need to provide the architects with as much flexibility as possible to produce the best possible result. A good architect will produce options for us that we can consider and make sure that we get the best result. We've got the Ravens, the Pirates, the Rugby Club, the Cricket Club, and I'll be sure that the Hunters Hill Trust will want to use one of those rooms in there at some stage as well as a community facility. And I'm sure Hunters Hill Council will want to use that from time to time. Perhaps we'll have our annual strategy meeting in there. And I'd like to be sure that all of those people were consulted as part of a proper design brief process so that we understand what's really needed in the community. I respect your research, Councillor Sanderson. I've got a great deal of trust in what you present, and I'm sure what you said was correct. However, we haven't spoken to all these people. Architects' input is absolutely essential in the design phase, and limiting them can produce some undesired results. If we were to ask the architects to come back with a number of options and look at what can be done at various sizes, we're then in a much better position to be able to make a good choice. If in fact it doesn't fit there, Councillor Williams, then probably solved in a different manner, I'm sure. Ambulant toilets and all the other things that need to be considered in these places for exercise outside rather than inside the facility, hard surfaces, soft surfaces, the landscaping. There's a lot of things to be considered here. Landscape architect will be involved, as well as the external architect, maybe even an interiors architect to get the interior right. But it's a very exhaustive process. It could take quite a while to come up with the right answer, and I would hate to see us limited at this stage. I understand that 450 might very well be the right size. I understand that 450 might even be higher than what the rugby club wants. But let's not limit it at this stage. It's too early to cut it back. Let's give the architect as much opportunity to come up with a great design and produce the best possible result. We've waited a very long time for this. I must admit, when 2.5 years ago, when the rugby club was harassing me on the way into the election, I wasn't all that impressed with what I was hearing. But I've come to understand that this is a very important facility for the whole community, And I do see it as a regional facility. These ovals are part of a regional facility. The park is a regional park. There are not a lot of parks like this in the region. And so maybe we need to spread our net a bit wider on how this facility might be used. So without pushing my point too hard, I would like to see the architect given as much opportunity as possible to come up with the best possible design that takes into consider everybody, including the Hunters Hill Trust, including the Hunters Hill councillors. For a couple of times a year we might choose to use it, maybe even a function that we choose to have. So I'd urge you to give the architect the best possible chance to come up with the best possible design for this very, very important facility. Thank you. Are there any further clarifications required? Could we bring the amendment back up on the screen again, please? So we're dealing with item 1B. Could I have all those in favour?
Need to go back to the next screen.
I've got 4 in favour of the amendment. Those against? Councillor Bennett, Councillor Miles, Councillor Collins against. That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor, is there any further amendments to the to this plan of management? Is there any further discussion required? So the recommendation is on page 69 with the amendments that have been passed tonight. And if there's no further clarifications or questions, question Councillor Crossley.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to speak in support of it, if I may.
Absolutely, you can. And I'll go back to Councillor Miles who for an opportunity to reply. So go ahead.
I'm not, Councillor Miles, you've spoken to the motion last night. It was, yep, okay, thank you. So it has been a long process, this plan of management. I watched it, a very long process back in 2013 to 15 as a resident, and I thank the previous council for all the work they did on that plan of management. And this amended plan of management has also been quite long. But I just wanted to read a little bit about the introduction to the plan of management, just a couple of points on there that really resonate, because I received quite a few emails over the last months, many months since the plan was put on public exhibition in October. And I just got the feeling that perhaps some people were forming their opinions and giving their feedback based on things that they'd heard or been told or been asked to do, rather than actually what's written in this document, or without the benefit of knowing all the other things that are going on in this document. It's such an important document that we councillors are voting on tonight. So I'm just going to run through a few points in the introduction that I think should resonate for the whole community. Boronia Park, it protects 3 endangered ecological communities and provides a valuable habitat for a range of native animals, including several threatened species. It's part of a regionally significant wildlife corridor linking Sydney Harbour and the Lane Cove National Park. It's listed as a heritage item in Schedule 5 of Council's local environmental plan and includes several items of Aboriginal cultural heritage, significance and European historic heritage value. It provides 3 full-size sports fields. It's been a venue for rugby for over 100 years and includes the historic grandstand and oval. It includes a cricket pitch and 3 high-standard lockable cricket nets, netball courts as well, junior playgrounds and a mixed-age playground. There's a couple of other points. It's traversed by the Great North Walk, and it offers a choice of internal bushland walking tracks and a range of scattered park and picnic furniture. It's a popular venue for personal trainers, fitness groups, dog walkers, other small commercial group activities and services. And it's an important scenic and visual element for both the local streetscape as well as views to and from the area. I love this introduction, which then goes on to a plan of management that is very thick, many pages long, And the management plan is built around all of those uses and needs and the things that we as a community value in Hunters Hill. And I'm very proud to be on this council that's overseeing the amendments to it and ensuring the security of that area for future generations. It's why, in the amendment just put by Councillor Sanderson, I support the slightly smaller size, only slightly smaller, and significantly larger than some of the proposed suggested sizes for venues that have been put to council recently. The reason I support a smaller size is because I've seen comparable venues of 525 square metres and they don't fit with the values of the community that we've built this plan around, based on their feedback, based on the history of the park and all of the needs that the park will be meeting. A 450 square metre site for a facility that the whole community can use is reasonable, and it speaks to any architect or designer to say that this is what we in Hunters Hill want to fit in with our heritage, with our community and with our values. And with that brief, an architect will come up with something beautiful that our community will love and use well for better years to come. That said, Hunters Hill is not a chocolate factory, and if anyone remembers the Willy Wonka movie that I saw as a kid, there used to be a line in it that said, "Nobody ever goes in and nobody ever comes out." Well, that's wrong. I, for example, use Ryde Aquatic Centre. I use Lane Cove Swimming Pool. My son, about 17 years ago, played rugby at Hunters Hill Oval and at all the ovals in our neighbouring suburbs. I value all our neighbours and our whole northern region, and I want them to value us as well. This is a premier park in every way for Hunters Hill. I'm really proud of the plan of management, and I'm grateful to the General Manager, the council officers and all the consultants who have endured a lengthy process of extensive, transparent community consultation to build this report. Which brings me to the final thank you, which is to our community who have engaged tooth and nail to make sure that this park that we all love services the needs of everyone. And I think it's a fine, fine plan of management, and we should all be very proud of it. It secures for our current and future generations a really valuable playground. It's also reviewable in just a few more years. Yay! And so I wish it well to the future councillors who will be sitting here reviewing it down the track, feeling proud of the park we've preserved for our whole community.
You done?
I am.
Okay, so we seem to have almost reached the end. It's moved by Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Collins. You've spoken in favour of the motion, the amended motion. So, Councillor Miles, do you wish to have a final say on this, write a reply?
Yeah, I will, Mr. Mayor. Only to say, and thank you, Councillor Crathorne, that sentiment is obviously what this process is all about. Just to say that things shouldn't be lost in the plan. We do tend to get caught up in, we tended to get caught up in a number of the sort of big ticket items, but there are a whole lot of things if you go through the body of the plan itself that go to the preservation of the park and its role in our community. And I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that this is a regional facility, and there's not many parks of this. Well, it's a unique park in our part of Sydney. It's our premier park. This is step one in many respects for a lot of things that are going to be implemented as part of this plan in Baronian Park. So, for those that have concerns about the facility, the community facility that's being proposed, there's going to be another fairly exhaustive process which people will need to participate in, and at the end of the day, we want to build something as a council that services not just the clubs and not just Barony Park Public School or the Huntersville Trust, but everyone in the community. And that really is what the aim is here. And there were assertions made during the course of this process that you know, it was a yin for the yang, and one group's getting everything and other groups are getting nothing. But at the end of the day, I think with the carrying through of the passage of this draft plan into the actual plan of management, we need to make the process from now on as collaborative as possible, because at the end of the day, the community facility that will be being constructed has to be something that is useful for all of our citizens, and not just of Huntersville, but of the broader region. So it's a really exciting thing for me. I mean, I've been involved in this process since I first got on council 8 years ago. And finally, for the club, some people have been talking about this improvement in their facilities for some 30 years. I know that the Ravens are excited about the prospect of not having to haul all their gear off and store it at home every week. So I think that it's a good first step, but it is just that. There is going to be a design process, an implementation process, and a construction process after this. And I think that we need to be as collaborative and make sure that people are as engaged as they possibly can be as we move forward, because this will be probably one of the most significant things that we do as a council, and it is quite frankly the most significant project that I have been involved with in my 8 years in Huntersville Council. So I think this is a great first step. I'm excited about what we can deliver for the community here, and I think that that there's a long road ahead, but there's one that you know, we need to encourage everyone to be involved in.
All right. Thank you. I'll put the recommendation with the amendments. Those in favour? Against? That's Councillor Williams against. Everyone else in favour. Thank you, councillors. That was the only issue we have to deal with tonight. We'll carry the other items from Monday's meeting onto the next meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you to the staff.